Welcome to episode 141 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. I can hardly believe that in a few days I'm heading out to the East Coast to present my play, The Commandment, at the Fundy and Halifax Fringes. I'm incredibly excited and just a little bit freaking out to be performing this play again. But if you're in Toronto, I will be presenting The Commandment for one night only at the Red Sandcastle Theatre on Thursday, August 16th. You'll find details and ticket information at homebodyproductions.ca. Speaking of the East Coast, you're going to be hearing a bit about some of the shows at these fringes over the next few weeks, so watch out for interviews and special Fringe Roundup episodes from both the Fundy and Halifax Fringe Festivals. If you have a comment about the show or just want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you want to drop me a line, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and my website is philrickaby.com. My guest is Aleena Needham, who is presenting her new play, Passing Notes, at the Fundy Fringe Festival starting August 21st. So, Aleena, your show that you're taking to the Fundy Fringe is called Passing Notes.
Yes.
Can you tell me about what Passing Notes is about?
I guess the place for me to start would maybe be to speak a little bit about someone I was friends with who gave me some of the inspiration to start the script.
Okay.
His name was Bob. He was quite well known here in our city here in London. He was a very, very popular spiritualist medium. And I had the opportunity to meet him, and we became friends pretty quickly. And he shared a lot of his experiences and his stories with me. Not really about people that he had done readings for per se, but, experiences that he had going on various retreats and places that he's traveled to, and some of the things that he's witnessed and things that have happened. And basically, some of his stories is what inspired me to start the script, because some of the things that he told me, had a bit of an effect. A couple of things made the hair in my arm stand up. And I thought, wow, that's got to be written into something, Bob. So that's kind of where it started. So Passing Notes is, it's a story about three people. None of them are seemingly known to each other, but through connections that they share on the spiritual plane, that's where their stories converge and collide.
And this is a solo show that you're doing. Have you ever done a solo performance before?
No, I have not. This is my first solo performance.
How does that feel for you? I mean, you are just a couple of weeks away from performing it. How does that? How do you feel?
I feel very excited about it. To be honest, I feel very excited. I feel very nervous as well. But writing a solo show was just something that I wanted to take on, as a writer and as a performer. I've performed in some fringes here in town, with groups, The last fringe that I did was with a group here in London called Theatre Provocateur. And their pieces are often, something with a social justice kind of a statement. So I did some things like that. Had a really great experience, but I have always wanted to create something that, for me, kind of reminded me of things that I like, things that I'm entertained by. I grew up watching black and white Twilight Zones. I'm a fan of horror fiction, things like that. Then, of course, the experiences from my friend who he shared those with me. So that was what motivated me to want to put this into a solo show.
I'm always curious about what drives people to create a solo show. As somebody who I'm bringing my solo show to the Fundy Fringe.
Right.
And so, as somebody who's performing a solo show, I'm really curious about what makes other people want to do it too. And, as a writer, there's a certain, you might think that, okay, this play could be done with, there's 3 actors, whatever. What is it that made you decide that you needed to tell this story as a solo performer?
So again, I'll just kind of go back to the start of the process. It didn't start out that way. It started out as a play with 4 or 5 different characters in it, so initially there were different characters in this show. And I started writing the script maybe about 1.5 years, close to 2 years ago, was when I sat down and just disciplined myself to just start the thing. And once I got it out and looked back on it, it just didn't carry the effect that I wanted it to. It almost came across as a bit corny, and I found for some reason writing it as something for more than one performer to do, I found myself relying on a lot of things like sound effects and different kinds of visual effects and things like that to really convey what I was trying to do. So I just kind of shelved it, and I thought, okay, you know what, maybe now's just not the time. So I put it away. And it kind of called back to me, a little bit later, around Christmas time, 2017, around that time, it started to call back to me a little bit. And I thought, I know what I'm trying to do, but what I've done is corny, and I just don't want to do this. So I just got the idea, what if you approached it as a solo show? So of course, doing that really made me, it forced me to kind of shave it down to the bits that needed to be there versus things that were there just to maybe fill space. And I found that doing it, basically the effect that I wanted to create was that feeling that I felt when I heard these stories for the first time. And I felt that doing it as a solo show just did a better job at creating that effect. And hopefully it won't be corny. I don't feel that it is, but that's up for the audience to decide, right? So
yeah, I mean, this is. Are you going to do are you going to try it out in front of some people first, or are you just going to go in to Fundy Fringe and throw it on stage and see what happens?
Well, I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I've got a lot of friends in my circle of friends here who have been very gracious. They've come to my home. They've watched rehearsals. I've gotten feedback from people. So my husband, Bill, actually had asked if he could direct it, because that was kind of the first test of what I had created was worth putting out there, was when I did a read through of the script for Bill. And he thought, wow, I really like that. Can I be a part of it somehow? So I said, well, why don't you direct it? So, so I mean, I'm not doing a formal performance in a venue, but certainly it has been seen by people whose opinions I put a great deal of trust in.
That's good. I found the first time that I performed my play, The Commandment, actually, when I was going to do it at the Hamilton Fringe, I needed, just for myself, before I did it in front of that audience, to at least do it in front of a trusted group of people, because I needed to. It was having an audience sort of change things. And in fact, as I sort of revisit it, and a lot of the time I'm working on my own right now, the importance of having somebody else in the room is highlighted for me, that it's more difficult to think of it or to perform it with no audience, even if that person is a director. So I found it really helpful to have a group of people.
Yeah.
That did not prevent me from feeling like I was going to vomit the first time I was going to perform.
Well, and I have to tell you, the first time I worked with the group that I worked with the last time, that the first time that we did a Fringe show together, it was 2010, and it was something that we had written collectively as a group. And right up until the second it was my turn to walk out, absolutely. It's like, oh, walking out the back door is still an option, and then it's like, no, it's not. Go do it,
Yeah. Every time I've presented something new, there's a moment in every play where there's an audience reaction that's expected.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get it, you're like, okay, this is not going to work. If they don't react here, it's not going to work. And so until I hit that point in any performance the first time, like if I'm performing something new, I don't know if it actually works until that point. And so it's just a ball of tension until, oh, there it is. There's that reaction that I needed.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. And I have to tell you, so, I mean, when we got the notice a few weeks ago from the communications team at the Fringe to put a synopsis together, I really struggled with that exercise to try to condense this into 60 words that were compelling. So I had a group of friends over and performed it in my basement. My partner Bill's in a band, so I borrowed the band's lighting rig, and we tried to recreate, a theater venue as much as we could. So I could get their feedback to help me compose the synopsis. And it was kind of interesting because, you had mentioned, well, there's the reaction that you're expecting. So certainly there's the parts and the pieces that I think are very compelling and maybe more interesting than other parts. But what was really cool was, having my friends talk about what they found interesting or the things that stuck with them. And I was just surprised by some of that, it's like, oh, that part, so that was kind of cool too.
Were the things that the audience took away very different from what you were expecting them to take away?
No, not radically different. Certainly following what just following the storyline and keeping up with, the different things that were being presented. It did translate for the most part as I wanted to, and then of course the things that don't are the things that you work on, right? Or, yeah.
Were you drawing the lottery?
Yes.
I was on the waiting list. I was number 2 on the waiting list, and found out like a week ago.
Yes, I noticed. Yeah, I noticed that you'd just been added. So
I was like, and you know what? Here's the thing that I said to myself. I said, okay, so I'm doing the Halifax Fringe. So there's a certain point at which I have to buy my plane tickets to go to Halifax. And somehow I know as soon as I buy those tickets, I'm going to get into the Fundy Fringe. So, and that is exactly what happened. So,
great.
What is your theater origin story? What is it that drew you to theater?
Well, certainly, childhood, was where it started. I was always that kid that was in the play, and, the high school I went to here in London, it's got quite a reputation for having a strong theater program. So I was involved with that. And initially, when I left high school, I won't mention what year that was, but when I left high school, Humber theaters, the theater program at Humber was where I was, as I thought, destined to go. So I went to that program and learned pretty quickly that at that particular time, that particular place, it wasn't the right fit for me at that time. So I did not finish. I chose to come back to London and kind of took a different career path and kind of built a life for myself outside of the theater world. Certainly still went and saw a lot of plays and things like that, but kind of took the attitude, early in my 20s that, maybe this really just isn't for me, And it was a few years later, I work at a nonprofit agency that serves people that have mental health issues. And that's when I met some of the Theatre Provocateur people. And they came to me, nothing to do with theater. They came to me because my role at the time was someone that you went to if you wanted to book space or if you needed keys or, things like that. I had an admin role. And so it was just, hey, you know what? We're a theater group. We want to maybe potentially rehearse here in this space. You've got a great boardroom. We kind of want to be here in this energy. Who do we talk to get a key? I said, well, you talk to me. That's kind of what my job is, So I had said, I'll help you with your space. I'm really interested in your project. Could I be involved? And next thing you know, I was part of the group. Writing alongside them, performing, everything. So we did a Fringe together that year. And the show did pretty well. We got invited to a couple of conferences later. We went to a hospital opening up in North Bay the following year. So we did a few things with that. And we had gone on to do other shows together as well. And that was kind of how I got myself back into it, was through the Fringes here in London.
How did it feel to get back into it? Was it strange? Was it unusual? Was it like coming home?
It was like coming home, but it was terrifying at the same time, and certainly, when, people I work with, other parents of my kids' friends, when basically everybody, knows you're doing this and people are kind enough to come out. So certainly am I going to be able to face everybody on Monday? Thankfully everybody was pretty supportive, and it really just, and what that process really taught me as well, is my specific outlet, is not necessarily being in somebody's play, but really my outlet is, having a very strong hand in what's created. And, that process taught me that I was a lot more of a writer than I had ever realized, because it was the writing and the creating was just as exciting, if not more so, than the actual performing was. I mean, I love the performing as well, but certainly enjoyed the composition and the writing every bit as much.
Yeah, I've found in recent years that while occasionally I find it nice to do something that I have not created, but that I'm mostly fulfilled by when I am performing and creating something. So if I have a hand in the creation process, then that's sort of where I want to be, rather than just sort of a journeyman. I show up, or, I show up and we do the job and then we go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah.
Had you, you said that, like, you hadn't known that you were a writer beforehand. Like, was writing something that you had ever really tried before? Or was it when you got involved with this group in London that really sort of became a thing for you? Well,
that was my first experience doing something creatively. Like, certainly I'd never written a script or anything like that before. So that was really the first time that I had the chance to do something like that, and was quite surprised at, I don't want to use the word easy. It's never easy, but once I disciplined myself to, once I got some ideas and disciplined myself to get them out onto paper, it flows, pretty quickly. Sometimes, you look back at it the next day and it's like, oh my God, like maybe it's not as great as you thought it was after a couple of days have passed, but, just kind of tapping into that well,
It's interesting about writing, and that like, I can remember I spent many years of writing something and then sort of looking back, like you said, a couple of days later and wondering about it. And I spent a lot of time, if it wasn't good when it came out the first time, I was like, well, that's it. This is not going to be good. And it took me actually years to figure out that, that's just a first draft. And the first draft, the job of the first draft is not to be good. It's just to be done.
Yes.
And then you go back and you make it good. But the first draft is never, it can't possibly be a finished product.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, no, definitely. No, my process when I sit down and get started, a lot tends to come out, and then it's about looking at what you did and finding the bits that are worth keeping, and then fine tuning and polishing that and making it more concise and more clear what's going on.
Do you find that the more you write, the more ideas that you have?
Yes, sometimes, not all the time, but it's like anything. I mean, the more that you draw yourself to do it, then the more that things can come through. Absolutely.
This is, I think you said that you're traveling to Saint John with your husband, or sorry, with your partner?
Well, both. Yeah, with my husband, Bill. Yeah.
Okay. And Bill is, so he's the director. So you're going to have like a supportive partner helping out at the Fringe.
Yes.
have you, excuse me, have you flyered on your own before? Is this a new thing for you, or?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, we're actually going to drive. So we are going to be getting in our car and driving down there. So and not
Wow,
very,
that's
well,
great.
yeah. Well, I mean the last time I traveled to Saint John New Brunswick, I think I was 5 or 6 years old. Haven't been back since that. So yeah.
Yeah. Are you ready for? 'Cause I've never done the Fundy Fringe before, so and I know that it's a shorter fringe, it's a smaller fringe, but I'm looking forward to getting out and talking to people, even though my introverted self feels very self-conscious and wants to breathe into a paper bag at the thought of it. But I feel quite comfortable in Saint John. And I'm looking forward to getting out and seeing how people react to it. What are you, I mean, since this is the first time that this show is really being performed, what are you looking forward to learning, to discovering? Like, what are you most looking forward to about this show?
What I'm looking forward to is the opportunity to use this as a medium to engage and connect with the audience. You know, that connection that happens between, I mean, there's the performer. I mean, you can have a great top-notch script, really thoughtful cues, all kinds of cool stuff like that. But the audience is every bit as much a part of that show as the person that's up there, and I mean, certainly I can relate as well, being a bit of an introverted person myself. There's always that part of you that, as you say, you want to throw up into a paper bag, but, and then the more that you talk about that and the more that you put that out there, the more you realize just how much everybody else is just like you anyway.
Yeah, it's
right.
true.
So I'm trying to be far less hung up on, is it good enough? Is it good enough? And what I'm really going after is this something that other people will feel connected to? And what I would love for people to say about this afterwards is, after I left, I was thinking about it, because those are the things that always really move me, and the things that I appreciate the most are the things. If I'm still thinking about this a few hours after I saw this, then that's how I kind of measure what I think was a good show. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you're saying about the audience, because, a solo show, one of the big challenges is that, you don't have a scene partner. That makes the audience your scene partner.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was talking with my director about performing The Commandment the first time, and he was saying things like, when you talk to the audience, and when you make eye contact with the audience, and I was like, wait, can you back up to the point where I have to make eye contact with audience members? And he was like, well, they're your scene partners.
Yes, yeah.
You have to make eye contact with your scene partner. And I thought there was no way that I was going to be able to do that, but he was so right about that, about how, making contact with the audience and how important that is to a solo show. And you know what? I've seen people who don't do that quite so much, and you really lose something. The audience needs you.
Yes.
In a way that they don't if it's not a solo show.
And something else that a very wise friend had said to me once, and that's, the audience wants you to succeed. No one's walking into that theater hoping that you're going to trip, or, that something bad's going to happen. The audience is there because they want you to succeed. They want you to as much. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. The audience doesn't. Yeah, you're right. They don't want to see a stinker.
No.
Nobody goes to the theater to say, oh, I hope this one is really shitty. And they're on your side, and so they're yours to lose, which is, again, it's intimidating, but it's good to know that they're actually on your side.
That's right. Yeah. No, you know what? I'm at a point. It was something I'd always wanted to do. I certainly spent enough time telling myself why I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, and then when the chance came, it's like, you know what? I can work this into my life and I can do this, you know what I mean, without having to walk away from other things I enjoy as well. So
it's kind of interesting the way that the things that we tell ourselves so vehemently that we couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, are the things that's, you know, I've heard it referred to as the lizard brain, the thing that you are so afraid of, which is the thing that you need. But the lizard brain only knows fear, hunger, and sometimes, you know, and sex. These are the three things that it knows, mostly fear and mostly hunger. But, you know, the fear is like a very real thing. And so if it's a challenge, if it's not comfortable, it makes you, it wants to run away. Yes. But often that's the thing that you most need to go towards.
Yeah.
Especially if you're spending, if your brain is so telling you
absolutely
not to do it.
Yeah.
Had you been telling, before you got involved with the theater group in London, where had you often thought maybe I should, and you were telling yourself the story of no, I couldn't, I shouldn't?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, my eyes would drift to audition notices and things like that. But, you know, again, it's like, you don't know those people. It's all a clique. You know, that voice, right? So, you know, learning to give it far less power, right? So.
Yeah. Was there any kind of struggle when you first joined the group? Were you scared to do it, or like what was that like? Because it's changed, it's a new thing to go back to.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It was a wonderful experience. I mean, of course, you know, getting ready for our first meeting, that was intimidating. I was nervous, but. Yeah. I mean, honestly, about 10 minutes after I walked in the room and met everybody, and we just kind of got down to business with what we wanted to create. And I was one of the group, you know, there was no distinction who's got the most experience, who's done this, you know, it was we all have, with that particular project, it was more about the commonality of our ideas and the message. The play that we wrote was about mental health. So we had some very definite things that we wanted the show to convey, and it was really more about creating what we wanted to be on the stage. And then let's worry about who's got the longest theater resume. You know, we can figure that out when we're writing our bios in the program, you know, like that's really all that's about. Like really the sitting down and the mashing of the ideas. Theater background really had less to do with it, and it had more to do with what's our common messaging and theme with what we want to say here in this piece. And that tone was just something that I took with me, you know, again, with writing something like Passing Notes. It's a very, very different kind of a thing, but staying true to what is the point of this? You know, what is the point? Like, what is the point of what we're saying here?
Are there any solo performers or solo shows that you were thinking of when you were working on this? Were there specific things that you'd seen that you wanted to emulate?
Certainly here in London, a performance from an actress, Raven Duda. She did a solo piece here at the McManus. It was called Addicted. And I was kind of about maybe 80% of the way done with my script for Passing Notes. And then when I heard of this performance coming, I thought, oh, you know, I got to see that, you know, make sure that I'm kind of on the right wavelength here with what I'm, or, you know, at least doing something that, you know, to see how it would hold up. And that particular performance, again, I mean, a very different piece than what my piece was, but that certainly encouraged me to finish it and to keep going with it. I mean, it was a fabulous show, and Raven did a wonderful job, and yeah. But, you know, I was going to say, it's very physically demanding though, isn't it? You know, like it's yeah, you really have to be in good shape or try to be anyway.
Well, with a solo show, you can't, you know, if they're in a show with other people, you will have moments where you're not carrying the load. And so there's a moment where you can sort of disengage for a second, even though, you know, we're not supposed to, but, you know, we do. We all have moments of like my grocery list after the show, and then you go back to it. You can't do that for a second. You have to be mentally and physically there for the whole thing. And so, yeah, you're right. It is exhausting.
So...
I found after after one of my first performances, I finished the show and it was great, but I went backstage and I wept because it was just like the whole thing had been cathartic and this great release. But it was, and that actually took me by surprise that after the show I would react to so much, the audience's reaction, the show, the performance, of like everything. But yeah, you have to be prepared for all of the things that come up during and after, and be on in a way that, you don't have to be in a regular performance with other people.
Yeah.
Is your drive out going to be a direct drive, or are you going to take some time, stop here and there, maybe stop and smell the flowers and see the sights, or are you just driving straight out to Saint John?
The ride home might be a little more scenic that way. Certainly getting there, I mean, we've never driven on a road trip of this magnitude either. So I've got my trip tracker book that the CAA membership put together for me and all those kinds of things. So, I mean, we'll probably maybe have to stop. We're going to be leaving on the Saturday. So we'll probably spend the night somewhere between there and Saint John. But I mean, I hope we have some time to look out the window and enjoy what's going on and not just be freaking out on the 401 the whole time. But,
No. I mean, the difference will be when you're coming home is you don't have a deadline of a tech rehearsal that's looming. You can take the time after. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today about passing notes, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in Saint John, and we'll go flyering, and
that sounds awesome. And Phil, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this interview. I appreciate it.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.